Hey guys, so today I am giving you guys my May TBR. My May TBR, as every TBR this year, contains only 5 books, but this one has some extras because there are 2 books that I do want to mention as I want to finish them, but I'm not committing to them neither. So first up, let's just immediately jump into the ones that I need to read because they're like continuations or because of buddy reads or anything like that. And so the first one of these is going to be The Hero of Ages by Sanderson. So this is the 3rd book in Mistborn Era 1. This is the final volume in this reread and I'm absolutely enjoying my reread at the moment, and I am currently reading Well of Ascension. I have not remembered a whole lot about Well of Ascension, so it'll be very interesting diving into Hero of Ages because a lot of people say that this book broke them and I'm like, why? Don't really remember, but okay. So basically the story starts off when Vin, a young Mistborn, is recruited into a team that wants to take down the government. One of the main selling points for this series is its magic system because it is based off of the use of metals. Ingesting metals gives you access to powers. Some people only have access to one, others have access to all of them, and Vin, our protagonist, is one of these ladders. It is a cool high story within the first one with the biggest of stakes, with some nice camaraderie between people and some intrigue throughout, and things really take a turn at the end of the first book. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing my reread for Mistborn Era 1. It has been a very long time, and while I remember Final Empire very well, the rest of the series is lots more hazy in my memory. Second series that I will be continuing with in the month of May is A Chorus of Dragons by Jenn Lyons. The 4th book, The House of Always, is coming out the 11th or the 13th, depending on UK versus US market, and so I'm reading this with Sarah from Voyage to Words, and so don't know when we're going to be able to read it. It depends on delivery times and things like that, but so towards the latter half of the month we will be tackling this series, or tackling the most recent installment, and I'm so not looking forward to having to wait for the final one, for the 5th volume. However, it will also give me time to reread it at some point because it is a very complex series. A lot of people actually complain about the complexity of this series. I loved the complexity of this series. I think if you embrace the complexity of this world and you kind of just go along for the ride, there's so much great things about this series. There's so much diversity within it. There's so many interesting elements being brought into a fantasy setting, but there is definitely complexity, and I feel like there are definitely things that I haven't really understood completely, so I'll be eager to reread this entire series before the 5th one comes out. But so first up, the 4th one. The 3rd one left things off on a very interesting note. It kind of reshuffled the board, made a lot of things that were kind of possibilities in the past impossible from now on forwards, and thus really elevating the stakes. So I'm really looking forward to this 4th book within the series. 3rd book on my TBR, let's just first do the fantasy section, I guess. And so the 3rd book that I will be reading is Assassin's Apprentice by Hobb. This is the 1st book in the Tawny Man trilogy, 1st series within the Realm of the Elderlings series. So there are 5 series within this realm, and you don't necessarily need to read all of them in a certain order, but for example the characters from this trilogy that I'll be starting now do make a reappearance in a later series, so I just thought, let's keep things simple, let's just read them in their publication order. So I have actually already read Assassin's Apprentice. I think one of the first books that I read for this channel was Assassin's Apprentice, so some 3 years ago, and I didn't continue on. I did enjoy it, I did really like it, but I didn't really fall in love with the character or fits. I did think that the story rounded off way too quickly, that it wasn't a satisfying end to the series, or to the book, and so I didn't immediately carry on, and so that's what we're going to be changing now. Over the course of the next 3 months I will be reading these 3 books, making sure that I finally get around to this series, finally get around to finishing this one, and hopefully continuing on with the rest of the Realm of the Elderling later on if I enjoyed this trilogy. So in Assassin's Apprentice we are following Fitz, who is this young boy. He's the bastard child of the heir to the crown. However, his father basically had this sort of impeccable reputation that is now ruined since it has come out that he has fathered a bastard child. Fitz, regardless, is being brought up within the royal family, and he is in this sort of unique position because he is a member of the royal family, but because of his bastard status he can also kind of blend in, where he isn't paid as much attention as other members of the royal family, and so he is in the ideal position to become an assassin. But so that is it for the fantasy books. As I said in my April mid-month check-in, I am never again putting 5 fantasies on my list, so the 2 remaining books that I have on this TBR aren't fantasy. First up, we have a sci-fi with a much more considerate length than most of these fantasies, and that is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. If you've been on this channel for a while, you know I've talked about this book already, and I was so eager to dive into it, so I got this one right after it was released, so it came out at the beginning of March. I got it somewhere like towards the end of March, because of shipments, and I wasn't able to fit it into March anymore. And then in April I tried to do it as well, but I just couldn't because of my overstuffed TBR, so I just said, you know what, let's just put it on my May TBR. So actually something else was supposed to be there, and that's one of the extra books that I'll be mentioning. But so Clara and the Sun is the newest release by Kazuo Ishiguro. It's the first book he's coming out with in a long while. It is a dystopian or a sci-fi in any case. We are following an AI, or an artificial friend as she's called within this book. And I think it's a lot about the observation of human nature from the perspective of an AI. And so she sees humans around her constantly lying. And so she starts to worry about whether or not she can actually trust humans, since they seem to be so eager to lie to everybody around them. So I've heard mixed things about this one so far. I really love Never Let Me Go, and I've seen people who absolutely love this one and who have loved Never Let Me Go, and then I've seen a whole lot of people who say that they loved Never Let Me Go but didn't really like this one. So we'll have to see what what my experience ends up being. This is a gorgeous edition in any case, and I'm so eager to finally dive into it and hopefully love it. Final book on this official TBR is Tokyo Ueno Station by Miri. This is a book that I'm reading for Kate Fields' Patreon, and so Kate has a Patreon, either one for classical literature or one from translated literature. I am on the translated literature one, and so we mainly been reading Japanese literature for that, which I'm totally fine with. I love Japanese literature, and so this is the book that we are going to be reading in May. And I gotta say that the sort of information that I could find for it when I was checking it out now really is super vague. It was really only talking about the fact that the author is Korean Japanese, and so they have a sort of outsider perspective, and so they were like the ideal author to kind of discuss outsider figures. So it really was super vague. I don't really know what the story is going to be about. It has a beautiful cover. It is also by a publisher that I have recently subscribed to, which is Tilted Access Press. They only publish translated works. They only publish translated works from Asia. And so regardless of the fact that I actually don't know what this book is about, I'm actually really looking forward to diving into this one. I really love Japanese literature, and so I'm looking forward to diving into another work by a new author that I haven't read anything from before, and hopefully finding a new favorite author within Japanese literature to follow. So that was it for my official TBR. So what are these 2 other books that I've mentioned that are kind of on there? First up is the book that I replaced with Clara and the Sun, and that would be The Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. So this is a recent release. It came out a few days ago actually, and so it is basically it basically for a very long time was my most anticipated read of the year. It's probably more or less still that, but there are a couple of other ones that have definitely reached that same level at this point in time. But so I really wanted to read this one after I read the premise, but I'm kind of forgotten a little bit of the premise, just so that I wouldn't spend all my time being like, why isn't it out yet? Basically it's about this girl who is being bullied, and one day when she's kind of hiding out from her bullies in her house, she steps through a mirror into a different world where she is surrounded by other kids like her, and I think there's some sort of an aspect to it that the castle that they're in is trying to kill them, or that they have to get out of it in time or something like that. In any case, magical realism, Japanese literature, give it to me. Yes. And then the final one is also one that is coming out in May, and this is the big problem because it's a huge book. And up until like 3 weeks ago, I was perfectly fine pushing it forward, but I just read the first book in this series in April, and now I cannot wait anymore. I'm talking about Master Artificer by Justin Call. So in April I read Master of Sorrows. I will have a disability and fantasy video out for that book, and I want the sequel now. So Master of Sorrows was the first book in the Silent Gods series, trilogy? I don't know. I saw a video of his, an interview that Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction did with him, in which he is saying that he has materials for 12 books, but I think they're like 3 trilogies, but I'm not entirely sure. So it's either Silent Gods is either like a trilogy within a bigger series, or it's the name of the full series. But so it's the first book in the Silent Gods series, and in this one we are looking at our protagonist called Anef, and the idea that he has specified from the beginning, that's also mentioned within the blurb, is that it is a origin story, but rather than it being a hero origin story, it is a villain origin story. And after having read the first one, I'm even more excited about that premise, because there is no way you'd think that based off of the first book. Our character is such a nice guy, and yes, he's constantly thinking about conflicting loyalties, and he's kind of got these dark impulses from time to time, but he's always choosing the right team. He's always choosing to be above other people, to be above these sort of petty differences or things like that. And so it's going to be super interesting to see how over the course of this series he's going to transform from this guy who chooses good whenever he is able to somebody who's going to be an evil character, a villain character. Regardless, what is mainly making it so that I absolutely want to pick up the sequel immediately is the disability representation. I have loved the disability representation within the first one, because this is a very ableist society in which our protagonist grows up, and our character is actually born with a disability that he has to hide in order for him to be able to survive within this society. There are a lot of things going on within the first book already. There's a lot of discussion around ableism already within the first book. There is a lot of representation for things such as mobility aids, mobility tools. And at the end of the first book, there's another sort of like twist or another plot element that is making me very excited about what is going to come in the second book and what other things we're going to be diving into when it comes to this disability representation. So want it now, but it is 1,000 pages long. So that's the problem. It is tentatively there. It is there in the sense that, yes, I will absolutely be picking it up in the month of May, but I do not commit myself to finishing within the month of May. I don't know whether I'll be able to keep myself from finishing it, and maybe at the end of the month I will have read that one instead of one of my fixed TBR books, and I'll allow that, I guess. But yeah, it's just an honorable mention, I guess, but I'm gonna try to finish all 7 of these that I mentioned, but 5 is what I need to do, but I want 7. In any case, if you have any sort of thoughts about any of the books that I mentioned here, if you've read any of these, definitely let me know down below and we can talk about it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for a future one. Bye!